Hi, my name is Juskow and welcome to the English Puzzle Project. The English Puzzle Project is a concept designed to help students who are learning English as a second language, and it is developed for students who are at the upper intermediate levels and beyond. Hi, back again. In this video, this is the introduction to the strategies of learning, and I want to talk about three things in this video. The first thing I want to talk about is this concept of, well, what is learning? What happens to you in your head when you're learning? The second thing I want to talk about is something that in the business we call fossilized errors, fossils. And the third thing I want to talk about is this concept of a learning curve. Now, what happens in your head when you're learning? What's going on? You know, it's the same thing if you're going to learn how to ride a bicycle, to play the piano, to a language. The things that was happening in your brain is that you're making a series of synaptical connections, and it becomes a loop. It becomes a pathway that you have. And you will notice this very often if you analyze yourself. When you approach a problem, you might have a very similar pattern of approaching problems because that's what your brain has decided is the best way to do. Sometimes you learn a mistake. You find yourself in a situation where you might say something in a sentence, in a social situation, like, oh, my friend live in this city. Completely wrong, but you know what? Nobody corrects you. Nobody evaluates this. And you yourself, after some time, after saying it 100, 1,000 times, this becomes natural. This is the way you're supposed to express it. And it's wrong. Now, I mean, it's wrong to the extent of grammatical wrong, but everybody around you understands you. However, it can be a big mistake when, for example, you're applying for a job. You want to be able to sound a little bit better than that. So, when you do this, and you do it 1,000 times, this is called a fossilized mistake, because you've developed a brain pattern that makes this sort of the natural way, the way that you should say things. And for you, in your brain, in your heart, this is the good way to say it. Now, when you come to my classroom and you say, my friend live in the city, I will stop you. And I will say, whoa, why did you say that? You will be able to sort of sit back for just a second, and 9 times out of 10, you can correct yourself. You can go, oh yeah, my friend lives in this city, using the S form for the third person. Well, will that correct you? Are you fixed after this? No, unfortunately you're not. Because what's happening is that you are now in a situation where you're going to have me, okay, addressing you and your brain. What do I mean by this? Well, what I mean is that I'm going to ask you to say, no, don't do that, do the right form. And your brain is going to say, this is the right form because I've done this 1,000 times before and this is what it works. And it doesn't work. So how do you fix that? The first thing you have to do is to become conscious about this. We call this mistake that you have a fossilized error. And the fossilized error has to be acknowledged somehow. And to acknowledge this, you have to be aware that it's a mistake. Now, like I said, it's not going to stop you right at the beginning. Just because the teacher says, no, that's not right, you have to put the S on that verb form. You still don't do it. But what you need to do is start to be aware of it. And when you're speaking, you will still make the same mistake, I'm sure. But in reflection, you should be able to, at this point, reflect on your production and say, oh, was that right or was that wrong? That was not the right way to say it. And that's the thing that's really, really important. The next step that's going to happen, that should happen, is that when you're speaking, you should be able to be aware of the fact that you're going to say, my friend, and you will pause just for a second. And you're going to ask yourself, live, lives, live, lives. Lives. Lives in this city. And be able to produce correctly. By being able to do that, you will be able to develop a new pathway in your brain. And that's really important to do. You're breaking the fossil and you're developing the correct method of presenting the idea. The last thing I want to present to you is something called a learning curve. A learning curve is really interesting because it's something that we all experience so many times, but we don't even think about it anymore. When we learn, we start through a slow process and we develop up into a faster accumulation of the knowledge, and then it slows down again. Let's take a look at the slideshow to see what the learning curve is. The learning curve is a sinusoidal sort of curve. As you can see, it sort of moves up in a curved fashion. And as you go through periods of time, you learn from very slow progressions, but it starts to advance, to be faster and faster. As you continue on, you think, my goodness, I'm a genius at this point. But what happens is that things start to slow down a little bit, and your amount of return that you feel you're getting is less and less and less. As an upper intermediate level student or advanced, you should be somewhere in the T6 area, or if you're really good, T7, somewhere there. And your objective is to do this, is to focus on those fossilized mistakes. That's rule number 1. Fix those little problems. And by doing so, you can push your learning curve upward a little bit. And that's a big, big, big production. Finally, as one student says, and the student is right, it's practice, practice, practice. The more you do so, the better you are. So in this video, we've talked about 3 things. We've talked about what learning is, how this happens, and what happens in your head. The next thing that we talked about is this concept of fossilized mistakes, how you learn mistakes and how they sort of stick in your brain and they're so hard for you to change. And finally, we talked about the learning curve. What happens when you're learning? In the next video, I want to start to get into the process of how you think in English. Is that possible? Can you do that? I'm sure you can.